Okay, we got everybody very riled up with our title. So let's see if we can hear what's going to happen with this theme. Whether real men do bhakti. So what we're up to, you can sleep. You can also watch it as a recording. It usually lasts for a half hour to an hour. Now, where we left off yesterday, Pritu had been conducting his 100th ceremony. Indra came to ruin it, steal the horse. Pritu's son thwarted Indra. And then Pritu got really annoyed that Indra was impersonating saints or using religious symbolism to achieve his personal ends. So he was gonna kill Indra. Then Brahma stopped him and said, you shouldn't kill Indra. Indra is a king of the gods. People need a king. You know that. And then Pritu said, okay, I give up on this. We'll give up on the ceremony. Just finish it. No problem. That's a big deal. Then Vishnu was very, very happy with that and came and started talking to Pritu, explaining things to Pritu about how not to get angry, not to get upset by having a real sense of identity. That was yesterday's class, whatever we call it. I just have this habit from living in the Hare Krishna temples for so long of calling everything a class. My throat's dry and I don't know where my drink is. So yesterday Vishnu was explaining to Pritu, if you have an externalized sense of I, then you get very affected by the external affairs in your life and you get aggravated easily and it's very difficult to forgive. And if your sense of I is founded on the root, which is Vishnu, then you don't get angry very easily, or you don't get disturbed by external circumstances. Now, so that is kind of going in its direction where he's talking about this amazing stuff about the true identity, the internal self, what it actually is. And he winds up by saying, don't get so deep into this concept that it divorces you from reality. Get so deep into this concept that it integrates you into reality. That the external world is actually a projection of the internal stuff. So take care of the external world with that in mind. And I love people who do that, Vishnu says. And he says, you do that so well, so ask a benediction for me. That's where we left off. Now, so we'll pick up here. Vishnu asks Pritu to ask him for something, for a boon, for a benediction. You know, Disney's Aladdin, some other actor finds the Will Smith inside a genie bottle, and then, wow, you got a genie that you can ask him for a wish. Well, these are the, genies. These are the gods. This is Vishnu. He says, ask me for something, whatever you want. So what's Pritu going to do? The conqueror of the world, Pritu, gratefully bowed his head to receive the orders of the world's all-powerful teacher, Hari. Amazed by the affection shared between Pritu and Hari, Indra felt ashamed of it. So remember this. This is also kind of relevant to today. Don't forget that, first of all, Pritu is badass, dude. He is the right arm from Vena. He leveled the mountains using his bow. He caused the earth to quake and tremble and run in fear. This guy is seriously manly. He's the king. He's the emperor. But it's also very interesting to see how much he cries. It's very interesting. Remember at the very beginning of the story, right after he was coronated, he starts crying. When the citizens came to him and told him about the famine, he started crying. And now here, the description was Pritu looks at Vishnu with eyes that overflowed with graceful love, and Vishnu looks back at him with the same vivid affection. And Vishnu tells him, I'm captivated by you. He says, O Indra of mankind, I am difficult to captivate by sacrifices. I am not easily attained by self-sacrifice either, and I am merely neutral towards those whose consciousness is neutral towards everything, but I am completely captivated by people who protect others, as you do. Your wondrously affectionate character has captivated my heart. Ask a benediction from me, anything you like, but he's affectionate, and that's captivated. This is a lot of emotion going on here between these two guys, Vishnu and Pritu. They're looking at each other with eyes full of love, and they're saying these gracious, lovely things to each other. Now, seeing that, Indra feels really embarrassed. Seeing the relationship between Pritu and Vishnu makes Indra truly humble. When Pritu was doing his big Vedic sacrifices, 100 of the emperor's sacrifices, Indra didn't feel embarrassed. Indra felt aggravated. Indra felt threatened. Indra felt annoyed. And he retaliated against Pritu. But when Indra sees the bhakti, or the love between Pritu and Vishnu, between them, not just from Pritu to Vishnu, but also from Vishnu to Pritu, he feels humiliated, embarrassed, humbled. Well, what does that tell you? Regarding the paths of the Vedas, which path is more powerful? The ritual path or the bhakti path? The bhakti path, Indra gave up. I can't fight against this. With the ritual path, Indra's like, I'll fight this. I can defeat this. So what happens? Amazed by the affection shared by Pritu and Hari, Indra felt ashamed of what he had done and bowed to touch the emperor's feet in apology. Indra. Can you imagine? Indra. That's literally a lot like if President Trump would bow his head at somebody's feet. Because Trump is very Indraic, having a Jeshta, prominent Jeshta moon. Indra bowed his head to Pritu's feet and touched his feet to apologize, but Pritu had completely abandoned all his anger and picked Indra up and embraced him. Pritu then turned his attention. Now, did he ask for his benediction? I also just kind of interpreted Indra's mind. There may also be a hint of Indra of getting very nervous here as well, because Vishnu just said, ask me anything you want. Ask me for anything you want. So Indra might be thinking, oh no, he better not be mad at me because he couldn't get anything he wants from Vishnu right now. So I better apologize right now. So Vishnu said, ask it for me anything you want. Indra apologizes, and then Pritu's going to ask for something, right? No. He then turns his attention to worshipping the all-attractive soul of all with ever-increasing devotion dedicated to Hari's lotus feet. So there's, in the Indian culture, there's like welcome ceremonies and respect ceremonies and things like that. Artis. You offer somebody a flower, you offer them water, you offer, et cetera, et cetera. So he did this. Hi, Heta. Then, after being worshipped, Vishnu turns to depart. He's going to leave. Remember, this is taking place on Earth. Pritu is the earth god, the earth god, you might say. Not, he's the Indra of Nara, of human beings. So he's on earth with the humans. And Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, all the gods, they come to Pritu ceremony, but the ceremony's on earth. So now they're going to leave. So what do you think happens with Pritu? What does he do? Does he say, hey, wait, what about my wish? He doesn't. I bet we would. Maybe. Petrified by the imminent departure of his beloved Hari, the emperor could not say a word. He couldn't say anything. He couldn't speak because more than his concern about his benediction, he was petrified by the sadness of Hari now leaving. He stood completely still, with tightly folded hands and tightly closed eyes, with tears pouring from his eyes, as he engulfed his inner heart in Hari. And this is what a Bhakta does. A Bhakta is always in contact with the Bhaktim, the object of the Bhakti. A lover is always in contact with the beloved, always. But when the beloved object is physically there, then the lover's consciousness goes outside of himself to the beloved. But when the beloved object isn't physically present, then the lover's consciousness goes inward to where the lover has an inner aspect. Right? You can see this in any type of love, any type of intense love. So it's certainly the same in Vishnu Bhakti, which is the paradigm of all love. Now, so what happens when Pritu sees that it's imminent, that Hari is going to leave, then he stops trying to have his consciousness directed outward towards Hari and instead tries to focus it inwards towards Hari. Seeing this, now when Hari sees this, seeing this with his lotus petal eyes, Hari could not bear to leave. His affection for his dear devotee detained him. This Pritu has a chain on Vishnu's feet. Vishnu can't leave. The chain is his love for Vishnu. So Vishnu is trying to leave, which means ascending to Dhruvalok, the nakshatra center. And as he's ascending, he sees Pritu expressing so much emotion that he feels that he can't leave. Pritu hears no sound of Vishnu leaving, so he opens his eyes to see what's going on. But when he opens his eyes, he can't see anything because it's full of tears. So he has to wipe away the tears. And as he finally gets enough tears out of his eyes, he sees what's called an incessantly delightful vision coming into focus. The Supreme Person still stood before him. Vishnu had suddenly ceased his ascent into the heavens, and his feet now touched the earth. Dizzy with emotion by seeing Pritu's affection, he stumbled slightly as he landed and steadied himself by placing his hand on Garuda, who had extended his shoulder to catch him. So it's not just that Vishnu very calmly turned around. Vishnu was shocked and moved by Pritu. So he stumbled back to earth, and Garuda had to catch him. And that's what Pritu saw as he opened his eyes. Composing himself as far as he could, the emperor began to speak. "What benediction should I ask from you?" he said. "What would a wise person ask from a master who could fulfill any wish? What if you really had Aladdin's genie? What should you ask for? And if that genie wasn't just a genie, but if it was Vishnu who could give you anything, what should you ask for?" Pritu says, well, I won't ask for anything that exists in this world. For such things are just transformations of the same material that the denizens of hell experience. He has a very interesting... That's interesting, Alf. He has a very interesting thing. That's nice, Kathy. He says, in this world, everything is recycled. Everything is recycled. All the matter is constantly recycling. And it's coming into a shape, and it's decaying from that shape, and then that same matter changes into some different shape. So whatever gold you have now used to be somebody's poop. The atoms in the gold were once someone's poop. So why should I ask for gold? It's gross. Everything in this world is just a transformation of the same stuff, and that's a symbolic way of saying that nothing is really valuable. Everything is equally valuable and not valuable. Everything is equally desirable and undesirable. So I'm not going to ask for any of these things that are composed of positive, negative, that are composed of desirable, undesirable. Then he says, I'm not going to ask you for clarity, like Alf says. He says, I'm not going to ask you for enlightenment, even though you are the master of enlightenment and you could give it. And his reason, that's a nice one. And his reason is, that's kind of what he does wind up saying, Alf. Here, I'll read you straight. Maybe since you're the master of enlightenment or moksha, maybe I should ask you for moksha. But if I ask you for moksha, then maybe I will achieve this type of liberation, which is where my consciousness merges into itself. And then I never experience anything except consciousness itself. But I don't want that. And Pritu explains, he uses the word dear, my dear. I don't want this hanta. I would never want to exist in a state in which I could not drink the experience of your lotus feet. So he says, I don't want anything in the external world. Everything in the external world is just a recycling of some external stuff. I'm not going to ask for anything like that. I'm not going to ask for moksha either, because in moksha, consciousness becomes neutralized and it just experiences itself. It has no more experience of anything external or internal, nothing. It just experiences being. I don't want that because I want to experience you. So Pritu now says, this is the benediction that I want. I am asking you for this. Give me infinite senses. I don't want these finite senses to experience these finite recycling of finite qualities. And I don't want no senses so that I don't experience anything except being itself. I want senses that are infinite. Give me infinite senses so that I can experience the infinite object. I don't want finite senses to experience the finite object, no matter how big or great that finite object is. I want infinite senses to experience the infinite object, you. Give me unlimited ears, especially, to hear what comes from the heart through the mouth of the greatest souls. He doesn't care about everybody else. He doesn't care about everybody else. Okay. So this is a very interesting wish that he wants. He wants infinite senses to experience you. Unlimited ears to hear what comes from the heart through the mouth of the great souls. Now he's going to explain what that is. And I'm going to find a better way to write this. I guess I'm kind of sensitive to the word breath because sometimes breath is stinky. I'll find some other English words for this, but this is the way I have it written right now. The breeze of their breath carries the pollen of their love for you from the lotus of your feet, which they embrace in their hearts. So that is a beautiful thing. The greatest souls have hearts like lotus flowers. On the lotus flowers, Vishnu. When the breath comes out of their body, as they speak, it passes through the heart. And it carries the pollen from those feet. This becomes honey as it passes through their vocal cords. The ears drink this honey in the form of supreme poetry. This nectar honey grants every boon, even to we who are without spiritual discipline and have no idea about the paths of philosophy. Any other benediction is completely unnecessary. So he wants to basically hear the Bhagavatam all the time from a heart, spoken by a heart that really realizes it. Now, you might have a doubt, like, what? You just want to hear this over and over again? Isn't that going to get tired? You say it's honey, but even if you eat honey, you get sick of eating the honey. So are you going to get sick of it? Don't you think you want to... I think you maybe rethink this. You should get moksha, because moksha is permanent happiness. It's not excitement but it's permanent happiness. You're all obsessed with this thing about me, but it's going to get tired after a while, don't you think? Velvet Alpha answered you, basically. Vishnu. Okay, so now Pritu is going to say, if somehow... See, this is the problem with putting up a provocative title on the video, is people... It just attracts more people to listen, but they necessarily don't really know what we're talking about at this point, because they haven't been following along with all this stuff. But hopefully you can somehow jump in. Pritu's answer to this, he says, if somehow someone even once winds up hearing attentively about your auspicious fame from those who really comprehend it, how would that person ever get enough of it? Unless they are a dull animal who cannot appreciate the difference between fine food and common garbage. Even the goddess of fortune herself, Shri, wants only this blessing. Now here's where it gets to come to the title of the video. You see, so the one point that he makes is the experience that infinite senses have of an infinite object that it is not finite. The way that a finite mouth tastes honey is finite. After you get a certain amount of the sweetness, it gets obnoxious, and you don't want any more of it. That's because it's a finite sense tasting a finite object. But Pritu's saying, I want infinite senses to interact with the infinite object. If somebody hears that, experiences the infinite object, they don't get to an end of it because it's infinite. Only somebody who's a fool would think so, right? And then he finally says, the benediction that I'm confident, what he's saying here is, he's saying Shri wants the same thing that I want. Goddess Shri wants the same thing I want. And he's saying, I want the same thing that Shri wants. So what he's saying is, I'm confident that I made the right choice in what I'm asking you, because this is what Shri asked for. So he's saying, my role model is Shri. My role model is the goddess of fortune. You get it? So I don't know how many of you know about Raganuga Bhakti or anything like that. This is the thing where you have a role model in your Bhakti. So Pritu is saying his role model is Shri. because she wants this type of blessing, the infinite senses to experience this infinite object, then he has confidence that that's the right thing to ask for. Now, Vishnu or anybody, now you come up to this point of, do real men do bhakti? What is this thing with bhakti? What is this guy, this king? This guy with big muscles, what is he crying all the time and talking about love all the time? Is that a very manly thing to do? Now, of course, you can say, yes, of course it is. The enlightened male. I'm not talking about the enlightened male. I'm talking about the archetypical macho man. Let's talk about Mars, planet Mars. The archetypical male. It's the god of war. Mars is war. Mars is violence. Mars is anger. Mars is muscle. Mars is ambition. Mars is lust. Mars is passion. Mars isn't tenderness. Mars is blades. Sharp, hard. Men are hard. Women are soft. Women are soft and wet. Men are hard and strong. What's this king doing? The archetypical male doesn't cry, doesn't talk about love, doesn't long for relationships. The archetypical male wants to conquer things, bravery. And if you sit with the yogic, I know, the enlightened male, blah, 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 because the enlightened male is not just Mars. The enlightened male is a balance of Mars and Venus. When I'm talking about manliness. Now, if you sit in the yogic circles for a while, and you get deep in the streets, as my brother-in-law likes to say, if you get deep in the streets with this stuff, with Indian culture, you're going to discover that there actually is this bias. There is this bias. So you'll see the bias that women, for example, can't usually do. Tapasya. They don't usually become tapasvis. And they don't do sannyas, and they don't go out and live in the forest by themselves because they're soft and fragile, etc. And you often see the bias goes the other way. That men, they should be doing tapasya. If you want to be a male spiritualist, then go wear tree bark, live in a cave, etc., etc., etc. Go sit in front of a fire in the summer. Go sit in the ice water in the winter. If you hang out in the Indian circles of these yoga circles, you'll see this. But you should be a philosopher. You're a rational thinker. You're not an emotional. Dude, bhakti is emotion. Emotion is for girls. Boys don't cry. So there really is a bias. You will even find groups that are very, very elitist, like Arya Samaj, Brahmo Samaj, and all those guys. That are these very elitist groups that are very Vedic, uber Vedic. They will actually say, what are this Puranas, Bhakti, and all this is for women. We rational philosophers, we study the Upanishads. And we practice austerity and we renounce the world. These women can't renounce the world. They have kids. Let them read these stories in the Puranas. And talk about bhakti and cry and sing their bhajans. Well, here's Pritu. Here's Pritu, the emperor of the earth. The guy who knocks over mountains with arrows. And what he's saying is, I want what Shri wants. I want what the goddess wants. He doesn't want to be like Shiva. There's a screw loose in your head. If you want to be like Shiva. Shiva is Shiva. Be like Parvati. There's a screw loose in your head if you want to be Vishnu. But if you're getting it right, like Pritu, then you want to be Shri. You want to be the goddess. So is Bhakti for women? It is. Pritu is not saying, no, it's male actually. No, it's not male. Love is feminine. Venus is love. Venus is peace. Venus is relationship. And Pritu is saying that's fine. That's fine with me. I want to be like her, like Shri. So Pritu says, I desire exactly what she wants. What does she want? She's Vishnu's wife. I want to become exactly like her, the lotus-handed goddess of fortune. I want the same relationship with you that she has. I want to love you as the supreme male, the storehouse of all attractions and qualifications. When there's some story which is also similar with this. There's actually there's a book called Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is an essential book to comprehend if you want to practice Bhakti Yoga. In that book, the author Rupa Goswami makes an important point that men are not disqualified from Bhakti. He has to make a point that men are not disqualified from Bhakti. So he says, however, they tend to become women in the perfected form. And then he cites, I can't remember because I'm not so up with Rama Lila, but there's some situation in Rama Lila where many sages saw Ram and they felt like Pritu did. They felt that they wanted to become his wife. And then in the next birth, they became all the women that Krishna married. It's really interesting stuff. So then Pritu goes on to say, Vishnu is going to say, well, hang on a second. Shri is already my wife. So what if you become my second wife, maybe there's going to be problems. So Pritu foresees that conversation and he says, she and I will not quarrel or compete over our shared husband. We will cooperate to serve your feet as one. And then Vishnu says, well, what if that's how you feel, but what if she doesn't feel that way? So Vishnu might have that thought. Pritu foresees that possible objection. So Pritu says, Pritu is asking Vishnu for the benediction to become his wife. So he says, if she doesn't want me, then screw her. I'm going to do it anyway. This is what he says next. He says, I am dedicated to you, so I'm not afraid of her. Even if the mother of the universe gets mad at me for my desire to share in her fortune by assisting her. Actually, he doesn't really say screw, but I says it's still okay. I know that you will calm her down. I am nothing compared to her, but you especially love the lowly, and you consider even their insignificant efforts to be great accomplishments. Actually, it's quite different than screw her, isn't it? But it kind of accomplishes the same objective. He says, if she doesn't want me to be your wife too, then I'm not afraid of that. You love me and you'll work that out. You'll calm her down, and I'm not trying to compete with her. I'm not as great as her or anything. I just want to share it in her fortune. So this is kind of really radical stuff, right? But this seems radical to you if this is the first time you heard it, but this is ubiquitous in all of the Vedic concept of bhakti. They don't try to redefine the male archetype, actually. They just say, yeah, bhakti is a female archetype. And men can get it because male or female is only in the external circumstances of their external identity. The soul inside in relationship to Vishnu is always female. So, but they always have, and I've seen Western scholars are kind of always amazed by this, that any poems and so forth that are written by great bhakti saints always come from a female voice. Anyway, how does Vishnu feel after Pritu says all this stuff? Vishnu speechless. His heart was stunned and bound in the ropes of emotions. He could not speak or wipe the tears that flowed from his beautiful eyes. By worshipping you, Pritu concluded... Actually, I don't know if I can explain this to you so well, but you might be able to get this if I try to give you an analogy. Do you know the way that dogs act? Like when a dog is around and he barks at you, but then a bigger dog comes over and then all of a sudden his tail goes between his legs, right? So that's the basic male archetype, is that the biggest guy around will take over. So that means if another guy comes around who's bigger, then the one who used to be taking over will either be forced or will intelligently go into submission. That's called alpha male, beta male, all that stuff, right? So you may experience that when a man, often a male likes to be around women because it makes him feel like a man. But if you suddenly get around like Rocky Balboa or like some Muay Thai kickboxer or something, all of a sudden you feel like a little girl. Like this dude could just rip you apart, and you better get on his good side, and so that he protects you instead of kills you. So the maleness ebbs and flows according to the environment. And similarly, the femaleness ebbs and flows according to the environment. But here we're just discussing the maleness. Now, the bigger the alpha male, the more the maleness in the subject declines. When there's no alpha male around, then the maleness in any minute male increases. But when the alpha male comes, then the maleness in the minute male decreases, becomes subservient. Now, when Vishnu comes into the picture, Vishnu is Parampurusha, the supreme man. He's the true male. The one and only true male. When he comes into the picture, the maleness, which is naturally latent in everybody's soul, women and men, goes down. And the femaleness, which is latent in everybody's core, comes up. That's one way to explain it. So it's also based on the concept that gender is affected by environment. When the environment is highly female, then the masculinity in the subject. When the object is highly female, then the masculinity in the subject comes out. And when the object is highly male, then the femininity in the subject comes out. So that may be something for you to think about. By worshipping you, Pritu concluded, great souls dispel all confusion. So what is this? Do real men do bhakti? Yeah. because there's no such thing as a real man except Vishnu. Everybody has male and female properties. But the answer is also no. Real men don't do bhakti. Real women do bhakti. And real men exhibit their femininity in order to do bhakti. Hence, Pritu wants to become Shri. Or Shri's servant, or Shri's maidservant, or something. He doesn't want to stay as a macho, muscular, manly king. Pritu says, great souls dispel all confused fascination with the glamour of external existence. I know that they desire nothing from this worship except to constantly remember your all-attractive feet. Then, in the great intimacy of love, Pritu chastised Vishnu. Now he's in the mood. So now he's feeling like a wife, so he's going to give him a hard time a little bit. So he says, he's going to chastise Vishnu. He says, no, why did you ask me for a benediction? That's not so smart. He says, when you say, ask me for a benediction, the whole world becomes deluded. You shouldn't ask people to ask you for a benediction, he says. Such words are like ropes that will only bind us to misery. For what can we possibly ask for except the ordinary, toilsome things that we are already so intoxicated with? We've divorced our identities from you and given ourselves to external existence. We have no idea of our true identity. So you shouldn't ask us to choose our benedictions. You should be like a father who does what he knows best for his children. Why doesn't Vishnu do that? I mentioned that yesterday, actually. Because you can't give a gift that is refused. The gift has to be received. So you can actually only give what people ask for. So that's why God can't force enlightenment upon the masses. You can't give what's not received. You can give it, but it just runs off and falls in the gutter. And then you can recycle it, I guess. But in Pritu's case, he's receptive. He said, I want to be with you. I want to experience you in the supreme way, which I think is the way that Shri experiences you. But in the end, I leave it up to you to decide exactly what's the best benediction for me, because I don't feel that I have the capacity to figure out what it is. That person is receptive. If you develop that mentality, then Vishnu can give you the best benediction. Now, what does Vishnu say? And what does Vishnu say? Vishnu, dude, you're weird. No. Vishnu's like, you're smart. So Vishnu says, oh, king, you're right. All the stuff you said about Shri and all that stuff, that's right. No corrections necessary. Oh, king, you're right. I will give you what you asked for, because you have asked for what is truly best. You were worried that maybe you're asking for something that's not really the best thing, but you nailed it. It's so nice when you're naturally the supreme male. It's so natural. Yeah, you asked for the best thing, to be my wife. You're right, there's nothing better than that. I'll give you that benediction. May your contemplations always be on me. This will very easily carry you beyond the external existence from which liberation is so difficult to attain. Please also convey to your citizens. So, Marie, that was you before, right? Asking what about everybody else? So Vishnu reminds him about other people. Please also convey to your citizens all that I have taught you. If your people can apply my instructions to their lives, they will all get great fortune. Achucha, how are we doing with time? Yeah, we got a little bit of time. Oh yeah, we'll just finish this chapter. And that's the next great thing coming up. The next great thing coming up is going to be, I don't know why I envision this as being some kind of like a tavern somewhere, but the next thing coming up is Pritu enlightening the citizens. Because Vishnu just said, share this knowledge with your citizens. So the next thing that's going to happen in the Bhagavatam is you're going to get to hear the conversation that Pritu has with the citizens. And then at that conversation, the 4 Kumars, Brahma's first creations, show up. And then Pritu stops giving his speech and he turns the mic over to them. And then he starts asking them questions. So then you're going to get to hear them enlighten him. Those are the remaining conversations. Now, with the remainder of this, Achucha, the infallible, expressed great appreciation for the meaningful words of Vena's son, the philosopher king. When he was satisfied, that's nice, when he was satisfied that he had reciprocated the king's affections, the king had given him, expressed so much love. Vishnu was not willing to leave until he felt satisfied that he had returned all of that. When he was satisfied that he had reciprocated the king's affections, he once again began to set his mind upon leaving. But first, he watched the king worship everyone. From the celestial beings like gods, sages, ancestrals, divine musicians, technicians, magicians, serpents, and dancers, to ordinary mortals like humans, birds, and all other creatures. The king worshipped the birds and the trees. That's how you do a Vedic ceremony. None of this pomp is garbage. Pomp and ceremony. There's no pomp in a real ceremony. The pomp actually is the worship that you give to others, but no pompousness. He worshipped them all with generous charity, humbly folded hands, gentle words, and a loving heart, for he saw them all as followers and expansions of carefree Vishnu. Indeed, the all-attractive had captivated everyone's heart, not only the philosopher king, but also the priests and all the attendees. Only after he finally left for his own abode, everyone else also went home to theirs. Right? You wouldn't leave. Would you leave before Vishnu left? The king then bowed his head to Vishnu, who is beyond the limits of manifestation and is the divinity of all divinities. He had departed from sight, but was still visible within the king himself. Finally, the king returned to his capital, and that's the end of that chapter. So I already gave you a heads up of what's coming next. Pretty cool, pretty far out. Probably for those of you who aren't used to this concept of God being even a person. How can you be an infinite object, an infinite experienceable thing, and therefore having distinct qualities such as a particular type of complexion, a particular type of face, a particular gender? Meaning that particular types of relationships become possible. So this is a whole new thing for a lot of people. Very interesting. Any questions? Ms. Vinay, the ideal Bhagavatam hearer. Alf also is an ideal. You guys are all very ideal. Imagine Vishnu at your party. Yes. That's sublime. All right. Great. Nice, Alf. Alf, you're a good guy. I like you. Diksha, yes. Sridham. Greedy Rick, in Sati Yuga are we androgynous? No. There's always male-female polarity between everything. Actually operates on magnetism. All of the things from the very elemental, the way atoms form, molecules and everything, it all operates on attractive force. And the way the attractive force works is the two ends of the pole attract each other. So there's always male-female property. It's the basic nature of Prakriti Purusha, which is the fundamental foundations of reality. Is Prakriti and Purusha. There's always male and female. But you don't have dysfunctional men and you don't have dysfunctional women. You have highly functional males and females in Sati Yuga. All right, guys. See you tomorrow for Pritu's words of wisdom to his citizens.